The Word About Life begins with some verses from Matthew chapter 5. It is part of the Sermon on the Mount. This may be an odd reading, but you're probably used to that by now. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, but I say to you. In verse 27, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you. Verse 33, again, you have heard it was said to those of ancient times, but I say to you. Verse 38, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you. And verse 43, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you. And then finally from Mark chapter 14, verse 58, we heard Jesus say, I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with hands. God bless what is said, what is heard. Spirit, move among us. Bless the reading, hearing, living of the Word about life. Amen. I was going to begin the message today in Joel Osteen fashion with a joke about construction and engineers. However, I could not find a joke about engineers because they're not very funny. Calm down, just kidding. Where's your sense of humor? However, I could find a joke about construction workers, but I can't repeat it. Doug Paget spoke from this pulpit several years ago, and he used these lessons from the Sermon on the Mount to call attention to the way that the Spirit of life and love will often reverse what we're thinking. The way that the Spirit of life and love works in the world, and that the Spirit of life takes the dead words of legalism, here's the rule, and flips it on its head to create a new wisdom and a new abundant life for people. In fact, Doug's book was titled Flipped. I appreciate this viewpoint that whatever the conventional wisdom of human beings might be, such as love your neighbor but hate your enemy, the Spirit of God will often reverse or expand it, such as, yes, love your neighbor, but also love your enemies. In this reversal, flipped and expanded way of the Spirit, the weak shall be strong, the poor shall be rich, the servant will be made king, and the person who claims to be king, well, the true mark of royalty is their willingness and capacity to serve, not to be served. I want to push this idea a little bit further and suggest such a process is a tool for our relationships with each other and our relationships with the world. When Jesus said, you have heard it said, but I say to you, Jesus acknowledges that we already have some idea, we already have some worldviews about the way life is. However, when he says, you have heard it said, but I say to you, Jesus started a process of deconstructing our views and our relationships so that new views and new relationships can be reconstructed. I'm fascinated with the emotional and spiritual process of construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. Now, you've done this a lot of times in your life. You may have reinvented yourself, that is, reconstruct, deconstruct, reconstruct again, in relationship to your life partner, You may have done it in relationship to your job. You may have done it in relationship to your children as they grow into adulthood. In other words, they don't want you to keep treating them like a child, and you have to deconstruct and reconstruct for the relationship to grow. And sometimes such a process, it shakes the foundation of our worlds. It shakes the foundation of our identity. And sometimes it's just a little adjustment and a minor hiccup in our day. Now, Peg and I, we watched a documentary several years ago covering learning specific science concepts in elementary school. And I searched for the documentary and could not find it. So you have to take Peg's word for it, not mine. If you find it, let me know. Right? Did we see this?
I did.
Oh, you did. I thought I watched it with you.
I've told you many times.
No, I thought I watched it too. All right, never mind. All right. You see how it is. What was observed was that for students to get the concept that electricity needed a complete connected current in order to light a light bulb, they first had to unlearn some ideas about electricity. The science teacher used 2 batteries, wires, and a light bulb to help the students unlearn and then relearn some basic concepts about electricity. This process of learning one thing in the 2nd grade and unlearning and relearning in the 4th grade intrigued the educators. They set up an experiment. They instructed the children how the eye works. Light reflects off an object. The eye lets the reflected light and the nerves in the eye translate with the brain what the object reflecting the light is. After the science lesson, the students were then asked if they were put into a completely dark room with no light, and there was an apple in the middle of the room, would they be able to see the apple? Many of the students said yes. They would be able to see the apple because eventually their eyes would get used to the dark. Despite the science lesson, many students insisted that even though there was no light, they would eventually be able to see the apple. The educators recorded the answers one by one, put the children in a dark room for several minutes, and then asked the students if they saw the apple. And some said no, but still some said yes. What the 2 incidents conveyed to the educators is that learning involves a process of construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. This is what happens in our faith journey. We construct a Sunday school faith, life deconstructs, and then we never go back to church again. That was a joke, by the way. Apparently not. No, hopefully we construct a Sunday school faith, life deconstructs, and the spirit of life and love through community with each other, through our relationship with each other, through our shared experiences with each other and shared conversation, our love and trust for each other, reconstructs an orientation toward life that is marked by love, inclusion, justice, and intimacy with spirit. And this process happens on many levels. I'm sure, for example, that people had formed opinions about me. Ken's okay. He's a nice enough guy. He tries hard, but he just seems to lack what's needed to push across the finish line. He's no Billy Graham. He's no Martin Luther King. He's no Jesus. These opinions are formed, and decisions are made, and relationships are shaped by them. On the other hand, some people may say, Ken is a great guy. He succeeds at everything he does. And the staff says every idea he has is a good one. Maybe not. He is the kind of person you want on your team all the time. These opinions are formed and decisions are made and relationships are shaped by them. Over time, something happens. Because the only thing for sure is that everything changes. Over time, I'm not as bad or as good as the original opinions. There is a process of construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. People do this to us, and we do it to them. I hope we can see the profound need for deep grace. The neighbor that you love and the enemy that you hate may not be the person you think they are. Love opens us to the process of construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. I know when I need to take some time off. It is when I have diminished capacity to love and listen and be open to the process of deconstructing and reconstructing. Once we acknowledge the reality of the process, we can pay attention to what's going on around us and within us. With grace and awareness, we can be less rigid and judgmental. I think this is a very practical relationship tool that we can use, share with one another, just like the one we shared last week. But again, I want to apply it to a bigger picture. You are asked to go around and place your dots on the potential wedge blade ministry that you think you have the most energy for. Is your energy based upon your construct, your idea, your view of church? Do we live in an age when we need to deconstruct the past notions and assumptions? Is the Spirit of life and love telling us, you have heard it said, but I say to you? If so, what is the Spirit telling you? This is discernment. If you spent more time in prayer, study, and conversation with each other, would you have put your dot in the same place? In history, the church has taken different forms. It is often behind the cultural curve. As healthcare advanced and more communities demanded hospitals, the government responded, and many small towns got their own hospitals. Churches began to see themselves as large gathering places for the spiritually and emotionally wounded. As education became a priority and the population grew, our communities began to build schools. In the 50s and 60s, churches were building education buildings and adding classrooms to their properties. As suburbs grew and shopping centers and malls were constructed, the downtown areas began to diminish. Churches began to move out of downtown areas, moved into the fastest growing zip codes, and began to look more like movie theaters and shopping malls. What is next? What is the thing we need to deconstruct so that we can reconstruct for the future? A few weeks ago, we had a funeral here for a family that knows this place and appreciates our open and progressive culture as a congregation. They turned to us and we welcomed them with open arms during the time of their pain and loss. They are very grateful to have a place that could set the tone for the celebration of their loved one's life and be a platform for the unique expression of their love and what it means to be a family. Our role for them at this time in their journey was very different from the past. In the past, churches acted as sacred space that pointed to the life beyond this one, and clergy were the representatives of rituals of that hope. Many times I hear people say, we want a service that is respectful, the right balance between somber and joy, and we want to feel spiritual without a lot of religious language. And they say this, and they look at me a little bit sheepish, hoping that I'm not offended. They don't know I already know. because they're not unique. They are a true representative expression of our secular culture. We are not a hospital for the healing of their wounds. We were not a school for education and formation. We were not their third home for coffee, fellowship, and one-stop shopping for their spiritual needs. We were their urgent care for their social and spiritual needs. Are we training ourselves to be the urgent care of healing and hope? Do our buildings, organizational processes, mission, and vision complement and empower each other for this future? If you were to have another chance to place your dots, would you put them in the same place? Perhaps all of us should have saved one dot back. We could have placed it on our foreheads to remind us that our church's construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction starts with ourselves. And you see, at this point, I was going to take a dot and put it on my forehead. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I thought I gave it to you. Did I give you one? Oh, so here's the climax of the sermon. Begin with me. All right. Amen.